Hello, welcome. And my name is Tracy Cook, and I am welcoming you to the podcast series Victim to Victory. This series gives a voice to those that have overcome challenges of all forms that dare greatly to share their real stories. Amazing humans that have seen hope and risen above those adversities to become victorious, that go on to support and inspire others to do the same. And today we are welcoming and giving a voice to Lisa Barrett-Oliver, who is from Colorado. And I really appreciate you for joining us today. Welcome, Lisa.
Hannah, thank you so much. I'm very humble and grateful that you have invited me on.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, a little bit of a backstory. Lisa and I connected through the Higdon Group Play to Win reality show in 2019. She is genuine. She is real. She has a powerful story. She is inspiring. She's a fantastic businesswoman and mum. And I am loving you to hear her powerful story that will inspire you to go on to be the best version of yourself. So Lisa, tell our audience, who is Lisa? Where does your journey begin? And let us get to know your story.
Yeah, so who Lisa Barrett-Oliver is, it feels a little overwhelming actually to kind of explain who that person is. And part of that is because I'm still figuring that out. I'm still figuring out who Lisa Barrett-Oliver is. But, if we look at just, from a very logical perspective of a lifespan, my story began on a ranch in Wyoming where I grew up. I, was born, raised, went to college, went to law school. I even have a burial plot in Wyoming. So I always tell people I don't live there now, but I will be going back. So that's where it all started. It's been interesting, probably the last 10 years, honestly, of my life, of really looking back on who I am and where I came from, because I always, I created this story around who I was. I created a story around my childhood. I created a story around my adulthood, a story around my marriage to my first husband. And it was after my divorce with my first husband that I'm like, I need to figure this crap out. I need to figure out who I am. And part of that just came from just a lot of stuff. I mean, I feel like sometimes I don't like to talk about it because it just sounds like a big pool of mess. And part of that mess is living in growing up. I lived around my whole extended family. So it wasn't just my parents and my brother and my sister. I lived around aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins. We all lived on this one ranch. And so living that, it sounds really glamorous, right? You're going to live with this extended family on this ranch in Wyoming. But the reality is, and that's always a story I told about my childhood, it's just how awesome that was. And there were great things about it. I mean, I'm not saying that it was bad, but and it took me really probably about 5 years ago to start admitting that I was, by other family members, not my parents, not my siblings, I was sexually abused. I was physically abused. I was verbally abused. I was abused in just about every way that you can be. And even to talk about it, it's like I have to hold that place in my throat. And always can't hold it. But what it did is it really put me in a place that I didn't realize as I was getting older. It put me in a place of shame and embarrassment and wanting to hide it. And, when people talk about rape victims or other victims of violence or assault, and they're like, well, why didn't they come forward sooner? Or, why are they speaking up now? And it's because there is so much shame, and you can't explain it unless you have felt it. You can't explain why, as a victim of these things, that you feel shamed, that you feel embarrassed. And I really tried to figure out, like, why is that? And I don't know why it is for everybody, but I think part of why it is for me is just the lack of protection as a child. You know, I didn't have people protecting me from that. And, you know, some of it was hidden from the adults in my life, but there were times that I was being physically hurt and nobody did anything. And I mean, to this day, I still see doctors over issues with my shoulder from having my arm pinned behind my back. I was pinned down on the ground. I have back issues that my doctor can't explain. And it's just, I'm thinking back, you know, in my childhood, and I'm like, I probably can explain that, but I don't go into it with my doctors. And, you know, so it's really about how do you come out of that, you know, and that was during my childhood. You might say, well, you know, you grow up and you move on, but you carry something with you in that affects so much of your life. It affects decisions you make. It affects the people you're around, that you choose to be around. And a lot of it doesn't make sense. There's no logical sense to it. And there's even times, I mean, to this day, that a certain phrase will be used, or something that will happen. Like even yesterday, I had something happen to me, and I was sitting there. I told my husband, I said, I'm just freezing. And what it's like, it was that physiological subconscious reaction to abuse that was occurring again, even as an adult. And my body, just my temperature drops. I get cold. I feel like I'm just like my whole body is just like shaking inside. And so these are real things that are tremendously hard to explain to people. And it's really hard to explain to people when you look like I look. Like I look like somebody who had a perfect life. I look like somebody who had a perfect family. I have a college education. I have a law degree. I have a wonderful husband now, and a wonderful marriage, wonderful kids. And so it's almost when people hear my story, it's almost like they're watching a show. Like it can't possibly be true. And that makes it even harder to tell your story when you don't look like somebody that they envision looks like someone who's a victim. You don't look like a victim. And
I think a lot of people, Lisa, would definitely be able to identify with that, because people think that you have to stay as a victim if you've gone through all of that. Well, if you've gone through all of that and then you're this now, then there's nothing wrong with you. But that's not the case. As you just said, those little things that somebody says or does or moves suddenly, or you watch on TV or you hear, it triggers something from your childhood. And I completely relate to that. And I know the Victim to Victory audience will as well, because we still trigger as adults, no matter how old we are, because they're wounds that can be opened sometimes quite easily.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the thing is there's, you know, I don't put the spotlight on this in any sort of way to really put shame on anybody else even, but more to just hopefully help somebody, because it's hard to even identify. I know for me, it was hard to identify why I still had this fear, why I still was reacting the way I was. You know, I've been through a lot of counseling, done a lot of personal development. I'm 53 years old and I'm still working on it. But you're right. When you don't have to stay a victim, and there's a lot of things that happen in people's lives, and I had a divorce, which I always feel like when you say that, people are like, well, join the club. So is half the world. But those are hard. And, some of those triggering things come up in the midst of that. And I had my oldest daughter died. I have 5 children of my own and 2 stepchildren. So 4 of my children are still living. And even when my oldest daughter died, it was, it was difficult just because of the death, but also because of the lack of, again, this lack of protection. Like I was being attacked in some ways, and I wasn't getting protected by my husband at that time. I wasn't being protected from that, and it was that moment. You would think it would be a life-changing thing to happen, and it definitely was. But the thing is that the change happened in my heart, but I still didn't have the ability to bring it out. Like I didn't know what that meant. And it really just trying to get through, I felt like I was just trying to get through life. That's honestly been most of my life until I was about 38. And I just had to figure out what am I going to do? And one of the things that was so important to me that I tell especially my girls now is that I turned off that voice in my head that warns me. I've turned off the warnings. I've turned off anything because I was trying to follow the path. I was trying to do what I was supposed to do when I was supposed to do it.
Yep.
And so I had turned that off, that ability to listen to myself and to follow my intuition. And so since I was about 38 years old, I can't even tell you when it occurred to me, but it did, that I needed to start trusting that because I wasn't even trusting it. It's not that it wasn't there. I just was turned it off, gone. And just starting to learn to trust that intuition and to, when I was feeling fearful, to not try to shut it down and hide from it, but I had to face it and go, okay, what's happening right now? What's going on? And I've been through a lot of counseling, and I have developed now skills to deal with that, which I pass on to my kids who sometimes think I'm a little crazy. But I tell them I do it so they don't end up at 53 years old still trying to figure this out.
That's it. We have to pass down that wisdom, and at some point they may not listen straight away, but what I've found is you'll be somewhere and you'll do something, or you'll be in a situation and they seem to step up or say something, you kind of go, you were listening. And yes. That's what our job is, isn't it, as parents?
Yeah, it is. And, I'm proud of those moments, and even when my kids call me out, I'm like, okay, you're right. That's totally valid. And, I look at them as, especially my daughters. I have, 2 sons, 2 stepsons who are great. But my daughters, when I see them stand up for what they believe in and they don't back down. And my daughter, who's 21 now, when she was in high school, was really bullied. And it was a hard situation. But I'll tell you what, she did not back down. She stayed true to who she was in a situation that it would have been very easy for her to just kind of shrink and become what was expected. And although that was hard, I'm grateful, and she knows this, I told her this, I'm grateful she went through that as a 17-year-old instead of as a 35 or 40 or beyond. At least she's had that experience. So it's great to, of course, I think my kids are wonderful, so they're perfect. Even when people date my daughter's boyfriend, I don't even remember what he asked me, but I said to him, they'd been dating a while, and I said, I just want you to know that no matter what, I will always pick her side. And he's like, even if she's wrong? I said, if she's wrong, we'll have a discussion about it. I said, but I just want you to know, don't ever come to me expecting me to say something negative to her or to beat her down because you're not happy with something. That's not going to happen. And I think that's important too. And I think it was important even for my daughter to hear that, and I'm not saying she's perfect, but I cannot imagine a situation where I would not protect her and be her adversary. Well, any of my kids, but her, this is the example, but be her adversary no matter who it was. Even if I thought she was wrong, we would still just talk about that, like, what's going on and you need to adjust some things. But I would never want anybody to think that they had that power to come to me and then exert that power over my children. Because that happened to me a lot and ain't happening in my house.
Oh, that is so brave. And I think that's a really important message for our kids to hear as well, because sometimes as parents, we don't tell our children about how we grew up and what happened to us. And I think it's so important, not only for open communication, but for them to actually get to know you and to know. Sometimes as parents we pretend to be really brave and know it all and we've got all the answers and my way is the right way, I'm old, I've been through this, you've got to listen to me. And I think it's great for kids, no matter at any age, to see our vulnerabilities and to see our strengths as well, because as we know, they're all sponges and they're learning from us. Even when we think they're not watching us, they are watching us. And to set that standard, to break that kind of, generational abuse, or that's the way we've always done this in this family, kind of attitude, which I totally don't get. It's like, yeah, it's wrong, but that's the way we've always done it here. It's like, no, it's still wrong. And, by you showing that strength and setting that standard, you're setting generations up to hold on to that strength, to go and change your family stories. That's amazing, yeah. Lisa. You're amazing.
You're so sweet. I think, I do think one of the best things that I have done is be a mom. And I think of a lot of times when I've seen, I see people complain about, my youngest is 18. She just graduated from high school. My oldest will be 30 next month. And I have a granddaughter, almost 4-year-old granddaughter. So I've been in this mom business for a while, and I don't get it when I see people, they'll talk down about teenagers, or they'll talk down about their kids, or just kids in general. And I just think, wow, you're missing a huge opportunity to be your kid's superhero. Because look, my kids don't think I'm perfect. They don't. But they love me all the same. They love me knowing I'm not perfect. And that's because when I screw up with them, I apologize. I tell them, hey, look, I realize what I said or how I reacted, whatever it is, I shouldn't have done that way. But I acknowledge my mistake. And I also have told them, my mom's not a bad person, but she wasn't a great mom. And I tell them, I didn't have a great example. So I'm figuring it out along the way, and I'm going to screw it up, but I'm just asking for grace while I am your mom.
That's
which
so
seems like a weird thing to do, because I think a lot of people want to be like that authority over their kids. And I am the authority. I mean, trust me. But I feel like they respect my authority because they don't think I'm doing it just to be an authority. I do it because I love them. I'm trying to be the best mom I can be, and I want them to be the best person that they can be. I always have told them I want them to grow up to be kind, caring, empathetic people. And I always say, whoever ends up marrying my kids have struck gold. And because
well, you
even
want
my
it to be a
sons,
respect. You want it to be a respect, not a fear, don't you? Yeah,
right.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And how did your family, if you don't mind me asking, Lisa, how did your family, did they know about all of the abuse? How did your family handle that?
It's really interesting. So what I say is physical abuse, and I literally have damage in this shoulder. And when I think about it, and honestly, I didn't even think of it as being physically abused until my kids were like in middle school. And it occurred to me one day that if my brother, who would have been, their uncle, if he had grabbed one of my kids and done to them what my uncles did to me, I was like, he'd be dead. I would have, I mean, and so it was like a moment in time when I was like, wait a minute, what happened to me, that's not okay, and that's not normal. But it literally took me having kids that were that old, and for me to just kind of have this process in my own brain of what had happened to me at that age, and looking at them and thinking, well, what if that happened to them? I would not stand there. So I honestly don't think my family thought like the physical and the verbal stuff. I don't think there was anything, they thought anything was wrong, because they all were doing it, and they were doing it even to each other. And as far as the sexual abuse, that was really very hidden. And there's me and my aunt that I'm aware of, because I don't think they even talk about it. And when I admitted this to my mother, and I was old, I had kids already. And my mom was mad about it, and just basically said, oh, he's a jerk or whatever. I don't remember what she said. And then my dad just said to me, he goes, well, you realize it's not your fault, right? And I was like, well, yeah. That's the only thing he ever said. I think the most hurtful thing was there was a ceremony honoring my grandfather, who was a wonderful person. And so my family then organized where everyone was going to sit at this event. And knowing what had happened to me, not only was that family member invited, but they put him at the table that I was supposed to sit at. And that made me realize, like, they have no clue. They just...
This is after they knew.
And so it was like a huge, like, wake up, like, oh my gosh, this is not even real to them. And so I just very graciously said, I'm not going to be in attendance. I'm not coming. And my aunt called me, and she's like, well, why aren't you coming? And I just didn't want to deal with it with her. So I made something up. I don't remember what I said. I said, I just can't be there. And she's like, oh, okay. But I was like, wow, this doesn't even make sense. And my aunt, who admitted to having the same abuse, she now interacts with this family member. And I don't get it. It's a strange thing. And I don't blame her either. This isn't like I'm judging her like she should hate him or anything, but it just shows the power of that somebody can have over you that doesn't make sense, and it doesn't go away. And unless you have people around you, or you have it in yourself, which I think, between my faith in God, and I just have this ability to just keep going and not ever stop in whatever I'm doing. If it wasn't for those things, I might be her. I might be just kind of, oh, well, that was when I was a little kid, all's forgiven, everything's done.
But it's like a lack of acknowledgement. It's like, okay, I listened to you. Anyway, moving on. It's like a lack of acknowledgement, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, wow, Lisa, that's And no wonder you've kind of had that block and you get triggered by certain things because you haven't had basically closure or even acknowledgement to
Right,
have closure from it, right?
right, right. And, as far as my family goes, I don't think I ever will. And I've just had to be okay with that. And, and I've done certain things. Like I don't have much to do with them. It's like funerals and weddings. Um, and I've moved kind of away. I'm still relatively close to where they are, but I have a great husband who understands, he understands how a husband can understand. And sometimes he has to set me down and go, you know what, this is what I see happening, and you need to stop. You need to put this, whatever the barrier needs to be, stop answering the phone call or the text or, whatever it is that, because sometimes even now I don't see it because that the little Lisa, the child Lisa, still wants to be the good kid, the one that gets good grades and does everything right and doesn't make any trouble and doesn't rock the boat. And, and that kid isn't gone. I mean, she's there forever. I just have to recognize when she's controlling what I'm doing versus me now as the grown-up Lisa.
Oh, that makes so much sense, so much sense. And I know that so many people are going to draw a lot of really good information from what you've just shared and really identify with a lot of those areas that you touched on there, Lisa. What kind of message would you like to leave our victim to victory audience today?
Yeah, I think just because of my own situation, I think the biggest thing is that you are seen and you are heard, and it may not be from the sources that you want it to come from or that you expect it to come from, but that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not crazy, you're not making a big deal out of nothing. But these are just, it's challenging, and to just not ever give up on yourself. And don't ever give up on that kid, or if it was a child in my instance, or even if it's a domestic violence situation, don't ever give up on that person that went through that experience, because that person is so valuable. And you just have to recognize when that person is showing up and making the choices, and when the person that's trying to heal is showing up and making decisions. And really just trust yourself. Trust yourself. Listen to yourself and know who you can trust around you. And you don't have to trust the people that society or your family or your friends or your neighbors tell you you should trust. You trust who deserves to be trusted. And the top of that list is yourself.
I love that message. And you're going on to do some powerful things now. You're a powerful businesswoman. And everybody, please support Lisa. She's been very brave to step into the arena to share her story today. If you'd like to connect with her, we're going to share her links here as well. And thank you very much for being brave to tell your story. You're so appreciated. And you can find this podcast on YouTube and the Facebook group at Victim to Victory podcast series. And if you get value from today, please like, subscribe, and comment. And a huge thank you. Please show support to Lisa Barrett-Oliver. Thank you very much.